I know you've just gotten out of a court case about a month ago. Maybe just to put us in the light as to what was happening there.
I realized that these are the guys who went out of their way, partnered with countries all over the world, BRICS, all their friends, to make sure that I don't make it as the DG of the ILO. So they all sued me for defamation of character, those ministers. It was only then that I realized there was beef between me and the South African government.
Also, I've got a big chunk of people right now who are complaining about our current president saying, "Oi, President Yabelung."
Yeah.
Are you for everybody? Where does UDM stand as far as abantu abamnyama are concerned?
So I don't want to comment on this President Yabelung. I want to leave it because I agree, President Yabelung.
I'm back again, guys. Once again, thank you so much for waking up with me. The whole country, all 9 provinces on Radio 2000. We're available on 97.2 all the way to 100 FM, the whole country. 6 to 9 a.m. Radio 2000. Feels great to be on radio. It's been about a month now, and I'm enjoying it. And you guys are showing me so much support. But an important one, on the 14th and the 15th of June, the weekend of June 16, we have got our podcast and music festival. If you're a podcaster or if you're somebody who's in the music industry, you'd like to become a podcaster, you are more than welcome to come and join us. You are invited to Emperor's Palace, Ekurhuleni. The tickets are available on CompuTicket for the SA Podcast and Music Festival. We've got a long lineup of podcasters. We've got a long lineup of musicians and DJs. It's just going to be a fun and great weekend. You're also more than welcome to book hotel packages. They are available on podcastandmusicfest.com. That's podcastandmusicfest.com. Or you can go to my website, which is djsmu.co.za. Now, in today's episode, I've got one of the biggest hustlers in the country, a person who's done really well in business. They've also been in corporate and they've led some organizations, but now they've just decided to pursue a life in politics. Interesting one. I'm looking forward to learning from this guest that we have, looking at their history. Before corporate, actually, they also played a very big role in the music industry. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. MTHUNZI. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me. Really, really appreciate the opportunity.
I'm very humble, sir. I think ngifuna uqala ngabantu abangawazi umsebenzi wakho just in summary. You've got a very thick and big resume.
Yeah. I do. I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed. I've done a lot of things, a variety of things. Sometimes it feels a bit odd when I look back myself. Where I started as a rural boy. I'm a rural boy from the Eastern Cape, a place called Herschel. Came to the lights for the first time at Goli. When I came to Wits, did my degrees at Wits. I thought I was going to become a lawyer, which is what my parents back in Ilalini wanted me to become. You know, it's a big thing to be a lawyer. In our environments, Ekasi, Nase Ilalini. So my mother was looking forward to this. So I went into it, but I got bored. Then I started thinking, what do I do now? And somebody suggested, back then when I was blessed with hair like you, I don't have any hair these days. Back in those days, my hairdresser said to me, "Hey, Ndot, maybe you should do entertainment law." I said, "What, entertainment law? Where do I get that?" He says, "No, he was overseas. Maybe I should look into it." In fact, I did some research, and then I found that there was a partner of our firm in Jamboree Plaza in California. They gave me some precedents. Before I knew it, I was in the music industry. I was representing musicians.
Okay.
I was fortunate to have some musicians who were happy to be my guinea pigs. I'm talking now back in 1992, 93, 94.
92, 93, 94, Kwaito was big.
Yeah.
So that's the Kwaito era.
That's the Kwaito era. In fact, what happened was Kwaito was just starting to be strong. And my first big case, in fact, in the Supreme Court, I was representing Lebuma Tuosa of Boomshaka.
Wow.
She and Christos Katsaitis sat in my little house in Midrand on the floor. And as we were entering the new democracy, somebody was suing Lebu. So I defended Lebu and I won.
What case was that?
It was a case where some people had argued that Lebu had stolen a song of theirs. That was the allegation. I remember the song was called Riabona, something like that. And so what they wanted us to do was to remove the song from the compilation because they said she stole it. Until there's determination as to whether she has or not, the song must be removed. So mine was to defend the song and to keep it in the compilation. So Christos Katsaitis was very instrumental back in those days. And this was, I think, at the time that Kalawa was being formed and what have you, with Oskido and Don Laka and so on. So we went to court and I was fortunate to win the case for Lebu. And then after that, I went into representing quite a number of artists who unfortunately have all passed on.
Oh, don't say that.
Yeah, the majority of them has passed on.
Yes.
Except for, I don't know where Jonina is these days.
Yeah, we actually had him on Radio 2000 last month.
No.
Well, not on my show, but he was at the station.
You must say hello to that man.
I'm a big fan.
Henry Kaba, very talented man.
Yes, sir.
Very, very talented man. But I don't want to go down that lane because I might get lost. But him, Sipho Gumede was a client. Jabu Nkosi was a client. Wendy Mseleku was a client. I bumped into Sibongile Mngoma just the other day because I knew the aunt Sibongile Kumalo very well. And the list is a long, long list. There was MTHUNZI Namba who calls me Bito back in the Sony days with Lindelani and them. And
yes, because Lindelani at some point he was running Sony.
At some stage he was running Sony. I think he was number 2 in charge, but he was in charge of A&R. He was the A&R boss and was working with Lazarus Robe and other guys. And then moved on, ended up with a label called Prime Media Music.
I remember Prime Media Music.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Prime Media Music was because Prime Media had asked me to come and restructure the company. There was a lot of trouble. I think in the rush to put things together, they sort of put pieces together that they didn't understand. There was Johnny Clegg, also late. How can I forget? I represented Jabu Kanyile. He was actually one of my biggest clients.
Yeah.
Now
From Bayete,
he would never do a deal without me. He would say clearly to the white folk, ngicela umlungu wami afike kuqala. That was me. Umlungu wami makefikile, we can now talk.
Can you guys hear the legend, the late great legend Ubab Jabu Kanyile? Before you could get into discussions about his music or business, he will make sure that his legal representative is in the room. I hope you guys are learning.
Without fail. And in fact, one thing that is very important for me to mention, it might be a joke to some people listening today. So I had tried to get a sign-on fee for Ucho Nina. Joe Nina was coming in, he was still young, and I was trying to discourage all my clients from taking these unhealthy advances where they take big sums of money and then the next thing they can't pay back. I mean, the whole world, though, is like that. I mean, even Michael Jackson had this problem. Everybody had this problem. So I was trying to convince them to have a sign-on fee. So I asked a guy called Gary Finch back then.
I remember Gary Finch.
You remember Gary Finch?
Yeah, he used to do ringtones. He was a bit chubby.
Yes.
He was. He actually got us into Blue Label Telecoms.
Yes. Before it was CCA.
Yes.
Before it was Content Connect Africa.
Connect, yes. Working now with Antos.
Yes. Antos, I know him as well from when I ran the music industry. Oh, I skipped that.
Yeah.
I ran the music industry as well. I was the CEO of ASAMI, Association of South African Music Industry, which is now RISA, the Recording Industry of South Africa. I lobbied for all local content in this country. People keep telling me about who's the guy who was at SABC. I'm sorry. With respect, I'm sure he did a lot, but I keep telling me he's a baby. He came many years after we had won the battle to have local content instituted. Of course, he was trying to make sure it's implemented.
Yes.
So for me, it was to lobby for it to be part of our law. Needle time, public performance right.
Yes.
I lobbied for that. And then my protege, a guy called Leslie Sidibe.
Yes, Leslie Sidibe is my Grotman. He's the one who helped us set up our record company, TS Records. Those days, he was still with EMI. They used to be in Steeldale.
So
on your way to Alberton.
So Leslie's boss then was a guy called Irving Schlossberg.
Yeah, I remember Irving.
Now, Irving, Harry Furman at Polygram, and a few of the guys, Guy Henderson at Sony, were all at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So when Leslie, actually, I had hunted out of university.
Hunters has partnered up with Tresor and Jaquel Culture House once again for the all-new round of the 2024 Foster the Sound Talent Search to help you get your career from ekasi to world famous. The entries are now closed, guys, sekuvaliwe, and the mentors are going through all of the thousands and thousands of entries to find the top 10 Fosties who will go head-to-head and note-to-note for a seat as one of 2 finalists. Whether you are in or you are out, out. The journey doesn't end here. Hunters and the Jaquel Culture House are hosting an exclusive music masterclass with 3 industry titans. That's Tresor, Musa Keys, and Shekinah on Tuesday, the 14th of May at AMPD Studios in town, Newtown Precinct. It's free, mahala to sign up, guys, and there's only limited spaces, so you have to register now. It's jaquelculturehouse.com. Hey, bandayo, Hunters, refreshes like nothing on earth. Are you serious?
Yes, I took him from Wits. I went to Wits and I said, I'm looking for a black guy who can do well in my law firm, because I was looking for black guys to come in, and I was the only one at the time in a Jewish law firm. I then interviewed Leslie. I took Leslie. Leslie worked with me at Calmer and Strime. When Leslie was tired of law, I personally was the one who spoke to Eving for Leslie to get a business affairs director job at EMI.
That's incredible.
Yeah. When they had CCP records. And,
yes,
yeah.
CCP, EMI.
Yeah.
I remember they had Abu Bam Rebecca, they had Abu Mandoza, they had big acts
at
the time.
Even Brenda Fassie was sort of, at the time. In fact, for me, I was also very privileged to be at a SAMI at a very historic time. Again, I haven't kept in touch these days as to what numbers are doing in the industry. But Brenda Fassie is the only South African artist to sell more than Celine Dion at the time.
At the time.
There was Titanic, remember?
I remember
Celine Dion sold about 500,000 units. Everybody thought she was going to get the award at the South African Music Awards, which were also run out of my office. I took the summers to Sun City, by the way. I also got Standard Bank to sponsor them at the time. But Brenda beat her. Beat Celine Dion. So, I mean, I was in a very good time in music, and Kwaito, as you were saying, was getting bigger and bigger. And for me, I always tell people that when we started the lobby for local content, I remember the radio stations were not very happy. Even Middletown, they were not happy. They used to say that Kwaito was bubblegum music.
Yeah.
And my argument was, sorry, who told you that? They say, no, it is. I said, but who told you? Because the audience is the one that must decide.
Yeah.
So I would think that you need to play the music. Once you've played it and people say they don't want bubblegum music, then we can all decide. And from there, it's history then. Kwaito, and then, of course, all the others, Gom and Mapiano, Afropop and everything. But for me, that was I think I was blooded into, work via the creatives. And I think that's why I've never been well since. People think I'm a bit, not a full box of chocolates, as they would say.
Because once you're in this creative space, somehow...
Yes.
Bonke
bathi ngiyihlanya. They always say no uyahlanya lo. Akaphilanga kahle, And just to finish the story, so once I eventually went to Prime Media Music, my pride and joy was that I was the one who was able to launch Kabelo Mabalane's solo career, Panzula for Life.
Wow. Because he was with TKZ.
He was with TKZ.
And I remember both of them, him and Magesh, went to launch their own solo careers.
So they were at BMG, if you remember.
BMG,
There was a mad guy, not mad like us, not mad.
BMG at the time was in Randburg, what they would call Sandton, next to the Sandton clinic.
Randburg, and then they moved to Auckland Park.
Auckland Park at some point.
They moved to Auckland Park, and the guy who was, I won't mention him by name because I never liked him, he never liked me, the CEO of BMG, difficult guy. The whole industry was scared of this guy. Keith Lister.
Keith Lister, I remember Keith.
He was a bad piece of meat, very bad piece of meat. So, and I was the only person who sorted him out.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe it. I wrote letters to him that drove him completely nuts.
Yeah.
Where I told him that, I can understand that your reference of a black person is probably your gardener and your helper.
Yeah.
So when you meet a black person who can tell you you're talking nonsense, you can't quite relate, and you are talking nonsense. But fast forward, when I wanted to negotiate now, he was still very upset with me, but I was so determined to get Magesh and Kabelo. So I went and I negotiated, and he wasn't budging. So eventually, I actually suggested to my team a guy called Vusi Leo. Don't know if you know him.
Leo,
I had recruited Vusi Leo.
He's also one of the people that instrumentally working with Grootman Leslie Sidibe. They helped us set up TS Records.
So Vusi is my boy, right? I recruited Vusi. I recruited a guy called Lucas Matlachane. We were doing double HP's work as well, publishing. I mean, we had talent. Like, we also had the lady who passed on, committed suicide, unfortunately. TK was also with us. We did her publishing. Tsakane, we did her publishing as well. But at that time, I said to them, okay, the only way we're going to get these careers into solo is for me to offer an override royalty. So I remember my guy saying, what is that? I said, well, simply it means we're going to have to put a top-up on whatever we're offering them as a royalty, that some of it must go to BMG when we are successful. But what you must promise me is that we're going to sell this music like hotcakes, because for us to break even, we're going to have to do a lot for you to make, for them to make money, and for BMG to also make money. So that was my entree.
That is so incredible. And that's off ramp a bit while we're still in the music. You
Yeah.
spoke about Irving Schlossberg, and there is a story that a lot of South Africans, even musicians, don't know. That a gentleman who started a company called Jive Records, which in turn went on to work with R. Kelly, they had the rights of R. Kelly's music.
Yes.
Is apparently from South Africa. I don't know if
Clive
you know
Calder.
that story. Clive Calder.
Yes.
Jive Records.
So CCP is Clive Calder Productions.
Oh,
Yes.
named after him.
Yes.
Oh,
That man
yeah.
left, went overseas. He later became, I think, the most successful and the wealthiest muso, producer, writer, lyricist in the UK. I think he's still the wealthiest.
Wow.
Yes, that's Clive Calder. So all about Sis Rebecca, as you were saying, about Brenda, were part of that record company, CCP Records. It was him that left this country. The other one that made it big that left this country was a guy. So when I became an entertainment lawyer in around about 91, 92, there were only Jewish lawyers. There was no black entertainment lawyer.
Yeah.
There was Mark Rosen.
Yeah, Mark Rosen. That was our lawyer at TS
Yeah?
Records.
Was Mark
all
Rosen.
the way until my career in
He
music.
represented everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
Thank you for
Mark
all the years.
Rosen.
Yeah.
There was think a guy at Wexman's, Derek Raben. Then there was David Dyson,
Okay, I don't know
who
David.
gave me my
Okay.
fit and proper. So when you go into law,
Yeah.
you get a letter from the Law Society. You know, they like to make it like so, you know, they make it serious.
Yeah.
I go interview by another guy in a sealed envelope. So I was interviewed by that David Dyson. He ended up going to be the CEO of AME, which was an entertainment house in itself, competing with Prime Media and so on and so on. And then
AME.
you remember AME.
Yeah,
So
I
David
remember,
Dyson was
yeah.
then disbarred. He was found to be doing some stuff. I don't know what it was. But Derek Raben is an interesting one. So Derek Raben was able to do a lot of work for some serious players in this country, because his brother, Trevor Raben, left and went to LA and became big in the movies in Hollywood. So he would get referrals from this guy all the time. And so when I came into the industry, those were the people that were there, and I needed to carve my own niche. And that's, you know.
That is so interesting. This is beginning of what you call the new South Africa.
Yes.
The so-called Rainbow Nation.
Just before.
Right?
Just before, as Mandela's getting released, as Chris Hani are starting to be people we must all know well. This is 91, 92, 93.
Actually, Kwaito was starting those days.
Kwaito was getting kwai those days.
Yeah.
And that's why Kalawa came in those times. I always tell the story, like I just told you the story of CCP. You probably know the story, but other people don't. When I say to them, you know, do you know how Kalawa came about? They say, no. I said,
How did it come about?
The name.
Oh, no. I just know that it's
Katsaitis,
Don Laka,
Laka,
and
Oscar Waro.
Yeah,
but
Kalawa.
people, you were the first person
Yeah, that I know,
I meet
yeah.
who knows it. Most people say, what? Oh, really? You know? So for me, I consider myself very blessed. It's an honor, it's a privilege to have come into the ushering of the new South Africa, and I was somebody in the music industry. In fact, also, some kind of trivia, the last time I wore a tie was when I was in the music industry.
Are you serious?
Yes.
But you've had a successful corporate career.
I
Even
don't wear
overseas,
ties.
you lived in Switzerland. All of those years, you're not wearing a tie.
I'll tell you two situations that were quite funny. The one was we were going to the Union Building to meet Thabo Mbeki. No, three actually. So we meet Thabo Mbeki was the first one. They were quite nervous. We were about Keith Lister Labo and because Keith Lister was very political. You know, he was notorious in the industry because of the way he behaved and the way he did things. But he was smart. He was a media guy and a music guy. And so as we're going there, he says, and they're all wearing their ties and suits, Harry Furman, him, and everybody. He says, so, you know, MTHUNZI, you're going to have to put on a tie today. I said, no. They said, but we're seeing the deputy president. I said, yeah. He says, okay, I'm not wearing a tie. So they said, but what are we going to do? I said, no, like everybody else, he works for us. I said, his salary is because I pay taxes.
Yeah.
We pay taxes.
Yeah.
I'll look decent.
Yeah.
I'll be civil.
Yeah.
I'll behave. But I'm not wearing a tie for him.
Yeah.
It's just not me.
Yeah.
The second time was when we went to see Jacob Zuma. It was so tense in the room, the guys that I went with, that I had to break the ice. So I actually had to say, President, I just want you to know the guys that I'm with here are very worried. They're very anxious that I'm not wearing a tie. So just so you know, I used to be in the music industry and I've never been well since. He just laughed.
Yeah.
And then later was when I was now leading all the employers of the world in Switzerland. Remember, everybody wears a tie there. Everybody. You're dealing with governments, you're dealing with trade unions, of course, as well, and dealing with business. But, it's a platform of 187 countries. I was the first African ever since 1919 when the International Labour Organization was built in 2017 to become the leader of all employers in the world. And it was expected, it's a darky, like darky was South Africa, you got to wear a tie. I said, no, don't wear ties.
Yeah.
They would all wear ties. I ended up having to have custom-made Chinese collar shirts.
Yeah.
Or there was even a shop where I would go and buy some so that it doesn't look so obvious and they don't think I'm disrespecting them because I just couldn't do ties.
I get you.
Yeah.
Till today?
Till today.
Wow.
No.
That's the music business.
I can't do ties.
I always say to people, if you can conquer the music industry, you can do anything in the world.
I agree with you.
Why do you agree with me?
I agree with you because it is the only space for me that I found I was the freest to be as innovative as I wanted to be without boundaries. In corporate they talk about innovation, but corporate doesn't know what innovation is because you can't have innovation if you're not allowed to make mistakes. Whereas in music, I would sit in the studio with people. I mean, I nearly said something I can't say on air, but there was a guy who couldn't hit a note.
Yeah.
The one time we're recording, and he tried everything. Vusi eventually went outside. But we're just going to go and get some. Like the mini vanilla story.
Yeah.
We had to go and do a mini vanilla. But generally, when you are in an innovative space in the music industry, in the creatives, all creatives, I find there's no right and wrong.
It's art.
It's art. There's exploration. There's looking for something. And eventually you feel it and everybody gets excited. They think, that's it, right? Yeah. And some people might think, is that the right note? But that's not the point. The point is you found something that makes chemistry at that point. So it is the first time that when I went into technology, I continued to be as free, not as free as I was in the music industry, but it allowed me to... Because the company in technology that I ended up buying was a company in huge, huge trouble. In fact, many people later were to say to me, MTHUNZI, when you got into that thing, we thought this time you've beaten far more than you can chew, right? But I had the confidence of knowing I can experiment, I can play around with stuff, I can put things together, see what comes out. And that, I think, confidence that came from the music industry, was the equivalent in that company probably of 10 MBAs that other people go and do at varsity. Because I turned around this company from a seriously loss-making entity with my colleagues, and we built it in 27 countries as one of the best training solutions provider in the sub-Saharan continent. We became the go-to for Cisco, won every award there was every year for 7 years in a row with Cisco, won every award for Microsoft, became highly profitable. I won IT Personality of the Year in 2006, won Businessman of the Year in 2009 from 2 competing entities. And that, I think, freedom, the freedom to explore, freedom to express. And I think that's also why, I've tried to explain to people that, for me, the creative space will always be the place I go back to. And this is the other thing I wanted to say. When you said, if you are in the industry, you can conquer anything. The second thing, though, that I thought was a joke at the time that I know is true now, is that once that bug bites you, it's beating you forever.
Forever, yeah.
So I can never escape.
Yeah.
I'm even getting goosebumps.
Yeah.
I know that I can't escape.
Yeah, it's your default button.
Yeah, I've tried and I can't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Same here.
Yeah.
Like I've tried, I've went into business and God has been good, but there's just that thing with the I wanna buya la.
Yeah, you
Belong
can't.
like media and music,
Yeah.
entertainment,
Yeah.
but it's beautiful.
It is lovely.
Yeah.
It is lovely. And you meet real people, Sbu. I think that's the important thing, is that corporate teaches you to have skullduggery, to have obfuscation. They like smokes and mirrors. Ngathi uyabona le movie ka Bruce Lee, le mirror. Yeah, that's a corporate thing, right? But in the music industry, and why most musicians, in my view, were the first ones to hit mental health challenges way before COVID revealed that it was everybody's kind of ailment. People were just hiding it or were not open about it, and there was stigmatization, is because the people that are supposedly structured people, and I say supposedly structured people, have always believed or think of themselves as being the ones who know what life should look like, right? And musos, when I encountered them, would not understand these games that are being played. It's either you're going to tell me I'm getting my money or I'm not.
Yeah.
Whether we're going to release the album or not. Whether we're going to do rock or not.
Yeah.
Is it going to be rock? Is it going to be pop? Is it going to be Afro pop? It matters to musos that we had one time in the summers an artist refusing to go and accept his award because he was put in the wrong category. And the people that were with us in the adjudication team were like, are they crazy? He's winning an award. And I was like, no, but he says this is not who he wants to be. He says that's not him. He says he has spent all his life portraying himself as a particular genre person, and now you're shifting him to something else. He says, I promise you, it took so much to convince everybody to say, listen, he would rather not win, And that for me is being genuine, is being truthful. You're not trying to get the award at all cost. You're saying, I want to be me. I want to be truthful to me. And that I got from the industry.
Which artist was that? You don't mind sharing?
I can't remember now.
Okay.
I can't remember. I can't remember. But if I ask Antos, she'll remind me.
Okay.
We're in the same committee.
That's beautiful. Now let's talk about your career, your corporate career overseas. Why did you decide to go stay in Switzerland? How long was that?
Well, I didn't really stay in Switzerland, nor did I have corporate in Switzerland. So I must explain what it was.
Yeah.
So I stayed on an aeroplane. I think that was more where I lived.
Up and down.
Yeah, it was up and down. Just before the COVID, when I looked at my passports, I've got like clump passports. I was doing something like 30 countries a year at some stage. And the COVID is the best thing that ever happened to me. The best. Because it grounded me. I still traveled because in the United Nations, they allowed us to go through, and I refused to vaccinate. So I never vaccinated me. So
Why did you refuse?
I just didn't feel good about it.
Okay.
Something felt wrong about it.
Okay, I get you.
And now I've got a lot of friends that tell me that I was right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what used to happen is I used to have to stick up my nose every 3 days. If I'm going to move from one Geneva to Turin, nose.
Yeah.
Turin to another place, nose. So I went to Geneva. Really, it was one of these. A lot of my life has been very kind of accidental. Even though I understand that it's always been planned because all our journeys happen as they should. But for me, I don't want to take credit for things I never planned. I never planned that I would be in Geneva ever, right? I never planned I would be in the ILO ever. Like I never planned to be in the UDM. It just, things happen along the way. So what happened in that particular instance is that the ILO was an unknown entity to me. There was a guy who was the COO of BUSA, Business Unity South Africa, which is the Federation of Business in this country, a guy by the name of Vic van Vieren. And Vic was disappearing every now and then. And the board was not happy. Board was always upset. This guy, he's always gone. He's never here. Yeah, but no, he needs to explain. So eventually, it got to a point where they wanted to fire him. You can read about this, by the way, in my book as well. My book I'll talk about that later. It's being published as we speak.
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way, for finishing your book.
Thank you. So what then happened is they were thinking of firing him. It was like quite intense. So I volunteered. I said, why don't I go speak to the guy? Let me go find out what he does before you fire him. Let's. So he said, okay, you go. So I went and I met with the guy and I said, listen, what do you do? He explained what he does. He goes to the ILO, said, yeah, what is it? What this ILO, what is it? I'm talking now 2000, probably in 6, 7, thereabouts. So he explains that, no, the ILO is where all the rules about work are made.
Globally.
All the rules globally. Anything you can think about work as we sit here comes from the ILO. All of it, right? So all the laws, the Labour Relations Act in South Africa comes from the ILO.
What does ILO mean?
International Labour Organization.
Oh.
So the ILO was born in 1919 when the First World War happened. The UN, bigger UN, was born in 1945, Second World War. Okay? Now, trivia for your listeners. The only person who signed both documents for the formation of the ILO and the formation of the United Nations is a South African called Jan Smuts.
Okay.
Yes. He was a statesman.
Is the one that Jan Smuts Avenue is named after him?
That guy.
Okay.
The one, even OR Tambo used to be Jan Smuts Airport.
Yeah.
That guy.
Okay.
Okay? He was a huge statesman. I mean, he messed up here at home with, the way they were doing things with the National Party and others, but he was the founder. So now, in the ILO, at the time, you had a lot of communists wanting to help workers because they were treated badly by employers and, trying to find ways of entrenching their rights, making their rights known, protecting their rights, and so on and so on. So, for example, one of the best examples is Convention 87. Convention 87 gives you the right to protest. So when you have a toy, and people must apply to toy beforehand, it comes from Convention 87. So Convention 87 in the ILO would come to South Africa as a member country, 187 members. South Africa is one of them. It would go to Parliament. Parliament would ratify that convention. And then once Parliament has ratified the convention, that convention would then be incorporated into the law in South Africa because Parliament has agreed. The latest that we've just incorporated now, although there's no implementation as far as I'm aware, is Convention 190.
What is Convention 190?
Violence and harassment in the workplace.
Okay.
It's a breakthrough convention. It was done under my stewardship and my leadership in 2019 when we celebrated 100 years in the ILO. And so that, people never think about violence in the workplace. Violence in the workplace is not only violence because you were smacked, but it's also the way people treat you, chauvinism, sexual harassment, manipulation, emotional kind of bullying stuff. That's all violence and harassment in the workplace. So the ILO, children, for example, the protection of children, the Convention on Children is the only one that has reached what is called universality, in that all 187 member states have ratified it. Okay, the others are still looking for ratification and whatever. Occupational safety and health, ILO. So anything you can think about comes from the ILO. So I went there because Vic van Vieren, after I'd found out what he was doing, then invited me to join him and a South African team to go and see what happens there. Little did I know that he's going to be recruited by the very ILO. So he left Busa, went to the ILO. When he left, everybody on my board, I was vice president for professionals at the time, everybody on my board said, Asiyazi thina lento. So I said, so you must go and represent him until we find a solution.
Yeah.
So I went to represent South Africa, ended up representing SADC, ended up representing Africa. I became the vice president for Africa. And then in 2017, after having been approached by the late Alberto Echavarria, good friend of mine who died of cancer last year from Bogota in Colombia, he approached me and he said, listen, we want you to be the leader. I said, but I'm a young man here. There's a lot of you. He says, no, we've been listening to you. We've been watching you. We think you're the guy. And then I said, he said, no, go think about it. It's still early. I mean, this was 6 months before. I went to Thailand to another meeting, met up with a lady who works for MEDEF. MEDEF is the French Busa. And this lady, we're sitting in a taxi, we're going to the airport. She keeps interrogating me about the next, leader of the employers. The elections are coming. So I said, yeah. She says, what do you think? I said, I don't think anything, And that's one of the things I learned in that space, is that when people ask you, you don't think nothing, especially the Europeans. I just say, no, I don't know. Yes, because they're trying, you must remember also, for us, it's easy to fall for that trap, because I always say that South Africans, maybe Kenyans as well, we are the most colonized of all the Africans, other than the ones that were colonized by the French. So it's very easy for us to fall into these very Eurocentric kind of, trappings, because we like what we see, we like what we hear, we like to think we're loved by them, better than others. And we can talk about that maybe at another time if we have an opportunity.
Yeah.
So as we're sitting in the car, I'm very cagey. She keeps asking, I keep saying, I don't know. She said, what? So you don't want to? I don't know.
Yeah.
So eventually we leave. I come back to South Africa. As I land in South Africa, the lady who's succeeded me now, Renate Hornung-Draus, who's from the BDR. BDR is the MEDEF, the BUSA of Germany.
Yeah.
Renate calls me, says, young man, you were sitting in the car with so-and-so. I said, yes. He says, you were highly elusive. I said, elusive? Was somebody trying to chase me or find something? He says, no, we're asking you to be the next leader of the employers. I said, no, she didn't ask me. She asked me questions. If she'd said that, my God, I would have responded and said, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
So then she said, we want. I said, who's we? She said, me, myself, and that lady, and a few others in Europe. And then before I knew it, I was to discover later that Alberto from Colombia and the entire Latin American bloc had agreed with the European bloc that they are going to have me as the leader. Believe it or not, the only people who tried to block me, guess. You can guess it.
Africans.
Abagini. Abagiti. They tried to block. They tried working with the US.
Yeah.
They were working with the US. The US fielded their own candidate. Anyway, I won. And I was told at the time I won by the biggest margin ever in the history of the ILO. And I became the vice president. And as the vice president, you're vice president of the International Organization of Employers, which has 150 or so business organizations, including BUSA. And when you speak for over 50 million companies. And then automatically, by being the vice president of the IOE, you become the vice chairman of the ILO, because you are the leader of employers in the house on behalf of the IOE. Right? And that's what happened. So it wasn't corporate. It was actually politics and business. It's organized business.
Yes.
And so I was toing and froing, as a serial entrepreneur. I was still involved in my businesses. There was a time when I actually used to literally every second week fly Joburg, San Francisco, Geneva. Yeah. Geneva, Joburg, Cape Town, when I was chairing the University of the Western Cape Council.
Yeah.
That was what I did, yeah.
But where were you living at the time? So
I was living mostly in Swiss.
Yeah.
But I wasn't living there enough to become a citizen.
Okay.
Because there's a percentage of days and nights you must sleep there.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think I was living here.
Okay, I get
But
you.
it was like to change suitcases and
then out again
and move to the next destination.
See, shy around and then out again. Yeah.
And when you say Boningosi, it has its good and its bad elements. As a father, you feel guilty, right? About not being at home most of the time. My marriage had failed already. Around about whether it was because of my travel or other things, I'll never know. But I'm sure I contributed in some way to it. But I was very conscious that I'm never home for my kids. My daughter was the one who benefited the most, because my daughter left home when she was in grade 9.
Yeah.
That would have been 12 years ago.
Okay.
Right? And went to study in the UK.
Yeah.
So she benefited, because if she had something at her school in Brighton, I would take a flight, take the train, be with her.
Around, yeah.
If she misses me or I miss her, flight, Geneva, we spend time together. She benefited a lot. Okay? Because, in Europe, everything, as you know, is like, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour, yonkinto, right? But the others, my son, for example, the one who's now a hip-hop musician, I missed his birthday every year, I think, for 10 years.
Oh.
Yeah. Every June 8, I was not home.
He's Gemini.
Yeah. Ulita, New Edison. His hip hop name is.
Oh, New Edison. Looking forward to hearing your music, bro.
So Ulita, I was never there. My mother is June 9. My brother's June 10.
Yo.
So 8, 9, 10.
But I'm a Gemini.
For 10 years, I'm surrounded.
Yeah.
For all Geminis.
I'm one of them too.
Oh, okay. So,
yeah.
so I get along the most, by the way, with Geminis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, Geminis are very frank.
Yeah.
Yeah. People say they are rude, but they're frank.
Yeah.
They tell you as it is,
Yeah.
and they hold no grudges.
Yeah.
They've told you if you are upset on your own, it's your problem. Right?
That's beautiful. I'm looking forward to hearing your music, bro. That's dope. And how's your relationship now with your son?
It is, and that's why I was telling you the stories, because so when I came back, and him and I had this tension about his music, right? And he misunderstood, because I'd seen so much of the industry. I'd experienced so much of the industry. There were good things, but there were also some bad things that bothered me, right? Bad behavior by some of the musicians that were my clients.
Drugs, alcohol, girls,
that I tried everything, but I was too inexperienced to help them at the time. I couldn't help them. It frustrated the hell out of me. Some I believed were the most talented people I'd ever met, full stop. But they never really got to realize their full potential. So I was saying to him, my boy, you're going to finish your studies. And he was saying, no, I'm a musician. I was saying, my boy, you have to finish your studies. But he misunderstood. He thought I was saying, because he mentioned it many years later, he said he thought I was wanting him to have something to fall back on. So until one day I heard him, I said, no. And so he would deliberately fail. He went to techies and failed everything. Have you ever had a person who fails? Fele yonke into. Man, uzithole zero. I said, no, what mean, bo? This boy is crazy, right?
Wenza ngamabomu,
right? Yeah. Until I explained to him, I said, my boy, I've got stamina. I'm an endurance sports person, as you know. I can, I'll wait for you until one day you do the right thing. Because as long as you're going to live with me and as long as you want me to assist, you are going to finish your studies. Because then I'll assist you with anything you like. Then he started questioning. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, what I mean is the following. You need to finish your degree. Whatever it is you've decided. It doesn't have to be a degree, but finish whatever you've started in your education. Then it will make you a better business person.
Yes, in the music industry.
In the music, you'll be able to run it well.
Yeah. People
won't pull a fast one on you, which is what now he's realized. He does all his things himself. He does his contracts himself.
Lovely.
I taught him, when he finished his degree at Monash, he ended up doing a business science and marketing degree. He loved it. He ended up getting an A for philosophy.
Lovely.
I said to him, how could you get zero for stuff? Now you get a distinction. Right? So I then decided that the thing I needed to do, because it gives me penance, is that I need to manage my son. I promised myself not to do anything in the music industry, but I'm managing my son. He's the only artist I manage until such time that I can find somebody who will do a job better than me or as good, right? So that's my gift of love to him. That's and to incredible. Make up for all that time. We get along like a house on fire. I get along with all my kids.
Beautiful.
They're all different, right? But this particular one is highly spiritual. He calls himself New Edison. My daughter would be upset. She also feels she's very spiritual, but I think my son is more spiritual. I think Lita is more spiritual. And his name is Lita, as I've said, which is really the opposite of MTHUNZI. But he called himself New Edison because he believes he's the new light. And I'm not saying this because he's my son, as I keep telling people. I'm saying this because I know quality when I see it. He's going to be huge. Huge. He knows it, though. He's not in a rush. He's the kind of guy who likes to say when things don't work out, he says, no, Daddy, it's not denied, it's delayed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's incredible, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I guess this should also be some sort of inspiration to all fathers out there and parents, to always go back and fix our relations with our children,
it's
especially
not easy.
When we're still alive. I know it's not easy.
Not easy. Parenting is tough.
Yeah. And let's get into this. Before we get into politics, because you've just recently gotten into politics, you're the mayoral candidate.
Premier candidate.
Premier candidate. Oh, not mayoral.
Yes.
Right? Okay. We'll talk
I might not even know the difference. Maybe I must also figure out the difference. It's Gauteng Premier.
Okay, Gauteng Premier, right? Basically what Uput Panyaza is, right?
That
now.
one.
Okay, I get
We're
you.
going for his seat.
Yes,
Uput Panyaza. Yes, I'll still call him Puti too, but we're going to unseat him.
Yeah. Before we get into that one, let's get into the one that you've been in the news for. I know you've just gotten out of a court case about a month ago, and I also do know that you are doing interviews on mainstream media, even on podcasts. I think a couple of weeks before that as well. Maybe just to put us in the light as to what was happening there before we get into the politics.
So what was happening there, my life has in the main been very, as I said, very privileged to have the kind of blessings, to have lived the life I've lived, When I go through the life I've lived, I think there are many people who get to the end of their days not having experienced maybe even 25% of what I've experienced. And that's why I say I'm blessed.
Yes.
Right? But when you live for truth and you live for honesty and integrity, it's not that easy, though. It should be, but it's not. So most of my life, I've had these big situations, and this one is just the biggest of them all, right? Even when I was at UWC as the chairman of council during FISMA's fall issues, there were some ugly apples that were on my board that I needed to get rid of, who did everything to destroy me. They tried everything. I used to make every headline of a newspaper in Cape Town. But I got rid of them. They were bad people. They were trying to destroy the university. And many years later, I was to hear the truth from some of the students as to the things they used to do to try and destabilize the university, right? And I left the university, a place I'm proud of, that I will always love, but I bled for it and I've got scars like you cannot imagine. Now, moving on to this one. So a few years ago, roundabout, in fact, March 25, 2021, was a very important 2021, 2022, I mustn't confuse, 2022. I was a candidate to be the DG of the International Labour Organization, the very ILO. One of them, the previous Minister of Labour, Minister Oliphant, convinced me to be a candidate. They wanted an African. There'd never been an African in that position now, right? And so I got in, and what I did not realize is that I would be decampaigned by my own government. Okay, that will make a separate book. Although I mention it in this book, just in passing as a teaser, that it's something that I will talk about one day. And I mention this because it was only then that I realized there was beef between me and the South African government. I wasn't aware.
You're not aware?
No, I was oblivious to this beef, to this tension, to this problem, until I realized that these are the guys who went out of their way, partnered with countries all over the world, BRICS, all their friends, to make sure that I don't make it as the DG of the ILO, right? Now, I then came home, decided, well, I'd finished my term as the vice president of the IOE, finished my term in June of 2021, and then the campaign was then to run from June of 2021 till the March 25, 2022. Then I didn't get it, lost in the second round of the election, because some people were, of course, convinced and influenced by South Africa. Some people received very big gifts, I was told. Some countries got some ambulances not to vote for me. And, serious stuff in the United Nations. Then I came back home. I'd already started with my partners. One of them is here in the studio with me, Nava Naidu, in a project called Tuja. And Tuja is what we refer to as a parallel universe ecosystem for the creation of jobs. It's made up of 8 sectors of the economy. I forget the 8th every now, but I'm going to try agriculture, aquaculture, finance, construction and property, renewable energy, health and pharmaceuticals, arts, culture and sport, and telecoms, media, broadcasting and fiber. I remembered all 8 today, so you must be my inspiration. So in that, it was designed in a way that would keep out the toxicity that we have in the South African market, where we keep saying we can't create jobs, but actually the complexity of not creating jobs is because not all of us mean the same thing about creating jobs. And not all of us are genuine about creating jobs. Some of us are there to just defend our territory and defend our brands, and will do anything to defend the brand, even if, you don't get a job. And some of us did not grow up eKasi, and some of us did not grow up eLalini. So our understanding of a job and an understanding of the impact of joblessness and the impact of unemployment, or the impact of lack of innovative support or lack of innovative enablement or entrepreneurial enablement is not quite the same, because some of the people in this complexity called South Africa, this rainbow nation, take those things for granted. They grow up with those skills. They talk business at home over dinners, right? So, akfani, right? So we built this thing, and how we built this thing was that on a microcosmic level, the company I mentioned, that was built in 27 countries, the training company, gave me the idea of how to work with my partners to fine-tune this thing. Because what was missing was that training company used to train 75 to 80% of the people that come to us. Some of them were graduates who couldn't get jobs. They would come and subject themselves to retraining because they knew we have clients, right? My clients were the entire telcos, Telkom, MTN, Vodacom, Data as an ICT player, Business Connection, Data Centrics, the banks, Standard Bank, FNB, Investec, were all my clients. Banks in Nigeria, there's a word I'm looking for, because in pre-consolidation of banks in Nigeria and post-consolidation, we had clients everywhere in 27 countries, right? But I noticed that we're always getting a 75 to 80% conversion from training to employability. And we would get excited, as we should. We would win awards. We won, at the time, it wasn't Department of Employment and Labor, it was Department of Labor. We would win these awards. But I always said to my people, I'm a bit uncomfortable with the fact that if we train 1,000 people, 200 are unemployed. And 200 of them have people who were graduates that were unemployed before they came to us.
Yeah.
So it's like a double whammy of some sort in mental health challenges. Because, you can imagine, as ekasi, you go ekasi, you are learned, uhlezi lapha, you can't get a job. Amajita yaspina lapha yaginza, all kind of things, and they are doing well. And we're now yeskele, right? It doesn't look right, right? So fast forward, anyway, we did this thing. We submitted it to the Department of Employment and Labor, to the UIF. But part of it was not just creating employment; it was also ensuring that the unemployment insurance fund itself is sustainable, because on its database it's got over 700,000 unemployed people. Now those are people who've worked before, as opposed to the over 6 million that are on the departmental database but they've never worked before. 70% of them don't even have matric. That's a different kind of challenge, right? So we were positioning ourselves for first low-hanging fruit, 700,000, which is why we said we're going to create over 700,000 jobs. Then once we've got the confidence and we've worked the models and we've tested the model with people who can work, even though some of them need to be transitioned into different sectors, because if you're in the mining industry, chances are the mining industry is not going to absorb you. So we might have to take you into fiber in telecoms, or might have to take you into renewable energy, whatever it is that is going to be suitable when we've assessed and analyzed and retrained you, and we incubate some enterprises and all of those kind of things. Beautiful, beautiful idea, right? And very workable and very practical. Some people were not happy with it. But I also was to discover they were not happy with it because I'm involved. It wasn't the project, because as I was told by many people, they told me that Unlesi used to go around telling people that's the Minister of Department of Employment and Labor until the 29th, because after that, I don't know what he's going to do. He's unemployable as far as I'm concerned. So you then have a situation where he'd say to people, hey, kunenye project in Tswembu, man. The only problem is like it's owned by this guy, man. So I couldn't be the person to do it. Then the next thing, and I'm cutting a long story short now.
Yes.
There was a guy who was helping me to try and resolve the problems, and my partners and whatever you. Ultimately, I was told that there are some people who want to meet me. It was supposed to be Minister Kodongwane. He ended up not being there, but there were middlemen in the meeting who told me that these ministers, who they mentioned by name, and this is very important because I always tell people I've never defamed anybody. I just said middlemen told me messages that they said were from these people. And those people never bothered to call me to a meeting and say, hey man, come explain. Explain what you're talking about. Never. They just decided to attack, right? So they all sued me for defamation of character, those ministers.
This is now recent.
This is October, November,
Last year.
January, February. There was even one in court today, but I know my lawyers had instructions to postpone it because you can see it's done for politicking. The whole idea is to make sure that there's point scoring. Remember today there was supposed to be a disciplinary hearing for Zuma, which I thought was the most stupid thing ever. And now it's postponed, so they don't have something to fill the gap. So they decided to set down a case against me so that they can use that to fill the gap. I don't know how it turned out.
Anyway, yeah.
But then there's also a contract setting aside. They're trying to set aside the contract, because we had a contract that was validly recommended by the Commissioner of the UIF and approved by the DG of the Department of Employment and Labour.
Signed.
18th of December 2022. Signed everything, but they are fighting it. So they went to court, but you could see that some of these judges are judges, I think, that are collaborating with some of the comrades. The one judge was not even allowing my counsel to speak in court. He was like always angry. So eventually we decided, you know what we're going to do is we're going to just appeal all these things. So at least we'll go to either a full bench or to the ASC, and we're not going to rush this thing. We're going to wait till after the elections, and then we're going to do what we have to do. So I've tried to summarize as much as I can.
I get you.
But the biggest issue was that I dared to go public. I dared to go out and speak. And little did I even appreciate it myself that my life would be in danger. I didn't know at the time.
So did you get any death threats?
Not myself ever.
Okay.
My counsel, my advocates got death threats at 3 a.m., two of them.
Yeah.
My main witness got death threats, had to take his kids and move them to their mothers because he's got ex-wives and whatever. But there was reason to believe from a lot of people that I wasn't safe. So I had security guards for a very long time. It's become better now, but one still has to play it safe.
In the media, they're saying it was a 5 billion rand contract, and apparently, allegedly, the people that you're allegedly talking about were asking for 10% of that project. I don't know how true that is.
Yes, they were asking for a 10% gateway.
Of 5 billion.
Of 5 billion.
That's 500
That's how it became 500 million. So it is 5 billion, and so the interesting thing is that Uput Panyaza and all of them have now got these things called Nasi Spani together with Ngesi. You can see that it's an attempted rip-off of my project, but they don't know how it works, so they're not doing it well. And it's not for permanent sustainable jobs. It's for jobs that are going to last for 3 months, 6 months, and whatever, which is not good. We've got a similar project in the presidency called the Presidential Youth Initiative, which is funded for 23 billion. Now this one as well, they're funding it for 23 billion, 18 billion more than my 5 billion. But they're still going to create less jobs than the ones I was going to create with 5 billion. So I don't know. It's confusing.
And then you decide to get into politics. When did the decision strike you? Or have you been toying around with getting into politics one day? When did you eventually decide?
Sbu, I think I was in denial for such a long time. I can tell you with huge certainty that it was never on my radar screen. It was not there at all. I have friends, 2 very good friends, who have preached over the last 3 years. Mhlambe nabo subliminally angazi, mhlawumbe influence. I don't know, because I kept on saying, guys, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this thing.
Yeah.
Then somewhere gule rubbish yama gateway and all these things, I end up getting all these messages on my LinkedIn page, thousands and thousands of messages from people sharing their stories, how their lives have been destroyed, how their dreams have been shattered because of the people who purportedly liberated us, right? And then my Twitter X goes wild. And then the next thing, everything basically just, there's people, young people, 25-year-olds to 34-year-olds, and people that, you think are sort of have found themselves in the early 40s. All of them are asking for me. They're saying, thank you for representing us. I'm thinking about, I thought I was representing me. Yeah. At what point did I represent people? I did this so that I could sleep well at night. I didn't do it for anybody, right? But it was only as I was going to the interviews, as I was being asked the questions about corruption and all that, I realized, actually, this is a little bit bigger than me. It's not about me anymore. And I think with that realization and the dawning of the truth, I had to face to the music, right? There is another colleague of mine who met me like that, actually here in the studio as well, who met me via LinkedIn and whatever, because she has her own drama with another minister who also is not, I'm not going to mention his name, but wanted 270 million to be written off without any investigation. If you don't do it, you're kicked out, because you must just do it, right? So I got a lot of these stories coming my way, fast and furious, very depressing at some stage, and I don't get depressed, me, ever. But when I read these stories, I was thinking, my God, it's like I've become a lawyer again now. It's like I have to deal with all these things. And then I started getting approached by some political parties on X, right, on LinkedIn, even now on TikTok. they are approaching. Then one day I'm invited to analyze the State of the Nation address. This is recent, February, on a Thursday night. I'm sitting at this television station. I'm doing my then they keep going to parliament. I keep seeing these people from political parties. Then they do a post-analysis and we're busy with it. And then this one guy speaks and I asked my colleague next to me, who's that guy? A friend of mine, actually. One of the friends who's been trying to convince me to be in politics.
Yeah.
A guy called Tahir, who's the Secretary General of the PSCU, the Public Sector Commercial Union. So I said to him, Tahir, who's that guy? They said, no, that's TUNZI. I said, and he does what? He says, no, he's the deputy president of the UDM. So I said, no, I think that's the party. He says, what do you mean, Prof? I said, no, that's the party I want.
Why did you make that decision?
Because somehow it registered for the first time that if I am going to go into politics, because I think I was already sort of playing with the idea, I'd already said to them, it doesn't look like I can avoid this politics thing, but I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what its shape is. I have no clue. But I know that I have to do something, right? So, but when I realized and I saw him and I heard him speak, there was something that kept on saying moral regeneration in me. And I remembered that when the General Holomisa started the party many years ago, he'd in jest said he would come and recruit me, but he never did. This was 27 years ago, right? And then I went on the Friday and researched his party properly now, right? Because, remember, I haven't been here for many years.
This is the UDM.
Yeah, the UDM. So I'm checking out the UDM. And then I see that the UDM has failed to give expression to the good work it does in anti-corruption work. For example, the Speaker of Parliament... the charges were laid by Bantu Holomisa, right? The SA8 Takatso deal that failed. It was Ngabayomzi Gwangwa and Bantu Holomisa in Parliament who'd pursued it when Pravin was trying to pull a fast one on us, right? The issue of Steinhoff, which Tahir was also involved in and whatever, and many people, the workers in terms of the billions that were taken by Marcus Jooste, again, it was Holomisa. But somehow he was not succeeding in taking the work, the respect people have for him and the UDM, and his brand is stronger than the UDM because I've gone on walkabouts with him door to door, and people love him to bits when they see him, right? So it was very evident that it's not lifting and leveraging that. So I put together a team of young people, mostly women. Two of them are in your studio, Chloe and Nava, Astrid, and then Tahir as well. Astrid is the deputy president of the same union that Tahir comes from. Kululi, a young man from Cape Town. And then there's others that we then brought in and what have you. And when we joined, no, I'm missing a step. So on Saturday, this is Thursday, Friday. Saturday, I remember that I've seen a lot of these politicians following me since this debacle of the 10%, with their hundreds of thousands of followers.
So, they're following your social media.
They're following me. There they are. So eventually I remember, I saw Holomisa following me. So I DM him. So I said, hey, Holomisa, we have I think I said something like, we have a very important or national critical something. I used some words. And then, can we meet maybe in the next few weeks? He comes back, he sends a message and he says, right away, Prof, here's my number. Yeah, it was like 2 hours. So we chat for something that must have been like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And then he says, I saw your response to the one party, because, there was one party that actually was recruiting me on what's his name. And I had said to them, should I decide to go to a political party, guys, you'll have to come and present to me because I've got quite a good following of young people. Yeah. So I'm not just going to do it. So I assume he saw those messages because he just said, in a week's time, I'm ready with my entire team to come and present to you. I welcome you already. A week later, my colleagues and I were in the UDM. The thing I never imagined, never thought would happen as well, was that I would be asked to be the Gauteng Premier candidate. I didn't see that coming. They did that without me.
What does the UDM stand for?
Whew, the UDM stands for a lot of good things. I mean, first of all, we've got a manifesto that's very solution-oriented. But the main brand, if you were to forget everything else, we say corruption destroys freedom. We are very good. We've got a track record. It's not theory. It's, we've done it. But within our manifesto, you will see that we're very big on the economy, but of course our approach is different. But the other thing that we're big on, that is a very big differentiator, which I see now Mbeki and Cyril have copied a few days ago, is that we said, CODESA wasn't so successful in dealing with everything. It got us here and we're still in a mess. We need to have another national big dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's in our manifesto. We've been pushing it as the UDM. And now I hear the two guys want to do that too. We talk about conscription. I've heard a few other parties as well. Now I think they've sort of taken a leaf from us, that we believe conscription is important for discipline, for employment creation, just to help us, with moving from this almost chaotic kind of situation to, having discipline and having moral regeneration. Issues of land, we also very big on land, but we are saying there are issues that are too contested in the complexity of who we are as a nation, that they need to go to the Indaba. We need to go and talk about them and find a solution for them there. But I think the other thing that we are very big on, that I hear a lot of people, there's a party particularly that says you must open the borders. We say no, close the borders. As we're the opposite. We love migration, legal migration. All big nations do well on migration. Mobility of skills and all of that is very important, but we don't want illegal immigration. So don't open the borders and do funny things and whatever you. In the Eastern Cape, of course, we still have the practice of ukutwala. I don't know if you know this practice. Uyakwazi ukuthwala le lalini basakuthatha mfana bakuthathe bathi ngiyaku-owna. Uyabona?
Konje babiza ukuthi barike sithutsela.
Ngisithutsela.
Babiza ukuthi ngesizulu.
Isithunzela.
Isithunzela.
It's the same thing, isithunzela.
Utokoloshi.
Yeah.
Bayitshela ukuthi umuntu ushonile kanti usebenzela umuntu
mfowethu bakuthatha, ungathi yamalanga, ungathi when we're doing Roman Dutch law, kuthiwa uyinto, we are owner, So we are saying that must come to an end. We're saying we can't have this anymore, So we've got a lot of other very important, but employment, of course, quality education. That our country, we spend the most in education, we spend the most in health, but both are in complete chaotic state, very abysmal. So we want to have a very different approach to it, because education for the sake of education is not good enough. We want quality education. And we want to work in a situation where the co-designing of curricula and the co-designing of what it is our kids are taught, and also the destigmatization of English in the afternoon in the morning get very difficult. I'm looking for a vocation training. Vocation training.
Yes.
We want to destigmatize vocation training, because, the tricky thing about vocation training is that all of us agree that we need plumbers. All of us agree we need carpenters. All of us agree we need electricians when we don't have them. Right? Because we closed all those schools and threw out the baby with the bathwater. But we are all good with it when it's somebody else's child.
Yeah.
We want somebody else's child to go there, but not ours, because there's a stigma. And now countries like Germany, even though I'm not in the habit of looking at developed countries to help us, but, I've been in the BRICS and I've been in the G20, B20, representing South Africa for many years. I've chaired the committees on education and employment for Germany and for Italy, for me to learn that sometimes you need a two-tiered approach to education, where we all go into education, and at some stage, those of us who want to be academic or intellectual can go that way. Those of us who want to use our hands can go that way. But it is a same path. And it is a path that treats us equally. There's no status. There's no, this one is better than that one. You have the same opportunities of earning, the same kind of bracket and whatever you. And should you decide at any stage you want to come back, you can come back. And you'll be credited either way. For vocational training, you'll be credited this side and vice versa. So we want to be able, and of course, this will be customized as per every different area. Fortunately for me, I also used to chair a primary school when my kids were at primary. And and in terms of foundation level and remedial therapy and remedial interventions that are needed in a child's life when a child is coming up. So some of us have been involved in education at all levels. In the ILO, we've been involved in creating employment, in being entrepreneurs, in understanding the plight of people, in understanding the challenges on the ground. Issues, for example, I was telling one of the leaders of the parties the other day at the Black Business Council, he's a president of an organization. In fact, maybe I should mention the organization. He's the president of Rise MTHUNZI.
Okay.
And Songezo, lovely guy, was sitting next to me going on and on about how we must recapitalize the IDC and the NEF. And I said to him, sorry, I'm sorry. You know, when he started by saying we need to change things. We can't continue doing the same thing and hoping for different outcomes. You know, Einstein's quotation, right? But somewhere along the line, he says we must recapitalize the IDC. Now, some people tend to think that what we need is more money. You know, sometimes more money is the problem. You know, what we need is innovation. What we need is creativity. What we need is to turn things around and say, no, the IDC and the NEF and all these other DFIs, your development finance institutions, should not be funders of last resort. When, you know, you've hit your head and everything against every rejection, and then they are sitting there saying, we are waiting for somebody to match what you want before we can fund you. They must be the first ones in the row to fund you.
Is that what you're going to do as a premier for entrepreneurs?
That's what I'm doing. Because Mariana Mazzucato is one of the best economists. Funny enough, he's one of the advisors for Cyril, but I don't think Cyril listens to her. Because she preaches all over the world that the way to create a sustainable economy, the way to ensure that entrepreneurs are funded and entrepreneurs become sustainable enterprises that lead to sustainable economies, is to be the first funder. Elon Musk was funded by the US government. Facebook was funded by the US government. Google was funded by the US government.
And we were not.
You see, you were not. Fandu pande ngokwakho ube hustler. Yeah. So that's what we're going to do. But I think more than anything, it's also to look at the budgets. For example, for me as a Gauteng Premier candidate, the first thing I would want is to look at that 165 billion and say, how do we reprioritize, right? Yes, the priority has always been health and education, but it hasn't given us the return on investment, right? So how do we want to play this? There's a little bit that is in economic development. How do we play that, right? So the first thing for me is to reprioritize that, is to look at short, medium, long term as a turnaround specialist to say, what can we do in the short term? Because, you know, when you do things as a turnaround, and I've been in many turnarounds to know that if you want to turn around something and fix it, you also you have theories, right? But you also have experience. And you have a team, some experienced, some not. If you want everybody to be inspired and everybody to have confidence, and for confidence to feed confidence, you also need quick successes along the way, right? You need to demonstrate quick successes so that people can say, oh, this thing works, right? And they start coming on with enthusiasm and passion to build for the medium term and the long term. So we would need, of course, to deal with the service delivery issues, your roads not being able to mess up our rims and tires, you know, the water leaks that, you know, Joburg is number 2 after Durban at 48%. We also need to prioritize those things, right? But for me, equally important is to have good teams. You know, we are entering for the first time, although I think it will probably be better in the next election in 2029, we're entering a very interesting period in South African politics where content and knowledge and experience and pedigree and meritocracy matters, right? We are leaving sloganeering and screaming and shouting, right? It's still going to take time, though, to get it perfected, right? Because the young people we're talking about, they don't have the toxicity that we have, where they've got this thing, we liberated you, and therefore you must just vote for us blindly. You know, that's nonsensical. So you have people now that know what they want, and we also want teams that know what they're doing. We want youthful people, we want experienced people. And I told another guy somewhere in one of these debates, he was saying, I think it was at the Wits School of Governance, somebody was saying, yeah, you know, young people have to learn from old people and whatever. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes it's true, but most times not. Most times you need to unlearn what the old people have told you because it's not kosher. You know, it doesn't take you anywhere. We've been filled with these ideas of very bad things, and we can't fix anything, you know. And for me, when we talk about, you know, I mentioned Einstein before, you know, that it's a test for insanity if you keep doing the same thing over and over and again and hope for a different outcome. But the same guy, Einstein, also says something very interesting. He says, I don't worry too much about the past. I worry a lot about the future because that's where I'm going to live. Yeah.
What are you going to do as a premier in the health sector? We're seeing the dilapidation of hospitals, especially some people who don't have medical aid, who can't access private hospitals or private clinics. People have some government hospitals. We can see dilapidation of all this infrastructure. You can see me a lot of people are complaining about the health sector. My equipment and all of those things. So, medical supplies.
So the health industry is a very complex one, and one that I know very little about other than my own health, right? Yeah. So for me, I believe this is one of those areas where the convention that the UDM wants to have is going to be very important for things like that, because we do need doctors and we need people in medicine who are experienced to help us in how to recraft and find a way to change things. I mean, I mentioned in one of the interviews as well that I was invited about 2 years ago to speak at the convention center. There was about 800 at a congress of cardiologists, and they invited some oncologists as well. And they invited me to come and speak to them. I was the keynote. So I said, what do I know about health me? Now, why would you invite me? So they said, no, let's go to dinner. Let's go for dinner. So we went for dinner, and they explained to me, they said, look, South Africa still has very, very well-equipped doctors, practitioners. But unfortunately, the management of it is a problem. We have managers and people who are supposed to run the places where we work, and they don't have the foggiest idea about what our work should look like, what the instruments we need should look like, what they should prioritize and whatever. So again, we have a problem with people who have no experience, who are incompetent running the show, which is why you would see such dilapidation, right? So I think it goes to the same argument when I say we need competent people, not people who don't know what they are doing. And at the same time, they were telling me that you now have doctors who suffer huge depression and huge mental health issues at work, because that's where you spend most of your time, right? So every time you think about going to work, it's like, my God, I'm going to see that manager who doesn't know and who's going to treat me badly, the violence and harassment at work that I was talking about. So all of those, for me, tell me that we need to have a re-engineering of everything in this country, you know? Because I think I mean, there was a time, my naivety for me, for example, when you talk about cardiology, I told them at dinner, was still thinking about Chris Barnard, I think it was, right? Yeah. I said, but we used to have Chris Barnard. We used to have like somebody. They said, you know, there was a time when we were top. Now we are sitting right at the bottom. I don't know, number 16. I don't know out of what. Yeah. Oncologists are leaving the hospital. The cardiologists are leaving the hospitals. And some people are leaving the country, and so on and so on. So and of course, you know, there's about 800, I think, doctors who are unemployed. And for me, I've never thought of doctor and unemployed in the same sentence, that it was something you could actually have. And when I talk to these doctors, some of them in Limpopo that I've engaged with, they have an idea as to what it is they need to do. They have an idea of how to take medicine to our communities, to Ekasi, to the rural villages. Some of them have started things, their own entrepreneurial endeavors that have no support to do pap smears, lalini, to do TB checks, lalini, HIV, and all of those things.
And medical supply deliveries.
All of those things.
Different creative ideas to do.
And they say it's easy. They say it's easy to do it. They say it's easy to do it, right? It's resource mobilization is easy. We're a country that has resources. We have natural resources. We have human resources, right? Our people in this country, the talent, the demographic advantage that we have, for example, of young people.
Yes.
70% of them in South Africa and in the continent, which is another opportunity for us, right? But that 70% is where the majority of the unemployed are. That cannot be. So how are we going to have continuity when the young people, and that they are very talented? All we need to do is to support them, enable them, empower them, and fund them.
And
for
a lot of them
sake.
are still training in Cuba, right?
Yes,
and they come back brilliant.
Absolutely.
And they end up going to the private sector.
In fact, the one I was talking about in Limpopo is the Dr. Mulomo.
Yeah.
He trained in Cuba, and he does these things the way they do them in Cuba. You know, he says, I brought this model, and I know it works here at home. But you know what? He says when he gave his ideas to the province, he says the premier of the province wanted to compete with him and run her own program that is completely lost, right? And they messed it up. They messed the program up.
Creatives and athletes, sports, arts and culture. What you going to do for us?
Are we living today here? Or we're going to be here forever? Because when you talk about creatives, you know, I'm like...
This is us.
Yeah, no, for creatives.
Athletes and creatives.
For creatives, I will not stop talking. I think that's my problem.
Let's go
So creatives, the arts and sports people is a very big part of who I am. I'm a sportsman, endurance sportsman. I've done all kinds of sport, raced bicycles, owned a cycling team that won a lot of races in this country. So I understand sport and the power of sport, what it can do for us, for nation building. You see what happens when Springboks win. We all forget that there's blue and purple and whatever color. We all work together. In fact, what I've said to some people is I'm looking, because I can't find the best example other than this one, I'm looking for that Mendoza effect, the Nkalakatha effect, right? Because the UDM is a party for all people, right? We don't, for us, it's not a color thing. We want everybody to belong, right? But for me, in a complex environment like South Africa that has so many moving parts, developing, Kasi, township, informal, formal, and then you have issues of this kind of music and that kind of music. Then you have Portuguese, then you got Greeks, and then you got, all kind of people, right? You do need a thing that is going to bring us together. And what Mendoza was able to do together with Gebi Leroux when they put together Nkalakatha was that they would play at rugby, people loved it. They would play at cricket, people loved it. They played at nightclubs, people loved it. They played at Kasi, people loved it. So we need that in our lives. I mean, for me, that's the symbolism for what we require, right?
The Mendoza effect.
The Mendoza effect. The Mendoza effect is important. I like that. May God bless his soul, right? So for me, and we have the ability to do that. We're a country that wants to get along. We're a country of people that wants to respect each other. But our history, unfortunately, is being allowed to keep recurring.
Get in the way.
Our colonialist history, our apartheid history, our whatever, it keeps getting in the way because we have people who come in and have the ability, if I may say, the evil ability to manipulate these cracks and make them big for us to be divided, right? And for me, I can't think anything better than the creatives for social inclusion. I spoke on Saturday at the Alex Kopano Center with a lot of creatives who are looking for solutions with the problems that we have at the moment with the Copyright Act, the amendment, and the Performers Protection Rights Act amendment as well. As you know, the last time there was movement that is progressive in copyright and intellectual property, for me, it saddens me, is when I was in the music industry. That was 30-something years ago, when we lobbied for local content, as I said at the beginning, and public performance. But when you look at creatives and you look at crafts, people in crafts, you look at people in television, you look at people in film and TV, you look at people in fashion, right? You look at people in design, you look at people in advertising. All of this is creatives, right? It's a huge economy. It can be hugely successful. In that project that they blocked, that Tuja project that I mentioned, you remember I counted it as one of the 8. Now, in the segmentation of budgets, the arts and culture and sport had about a 380 million budget. I mean, if you break down 5 billion according to 8, it'll give you that figure thereabouts to 400, right? Million. Because for me, it is a missed opportunity. It is a missed opportunity. And I don't understand how, when creatives were part of our liberation too, you know, I remember I used to go to Lesotho just for a music festival because we couldn't do things here in South Africa, Letambulu and Kaifa Semenya and whatever the case may be. And now when you look at the talent we have on the ground with all kinds of creatives in the fashion industry, you know, the diversity that we have as a people, right? And the ability that our people have. For me, what I want is to bring places like the Funda Center. I don't know if you remember.
I remember, Soweto.
Funda Center is
Soweto.
Soweto.
Used to teach there, yeah.
Funda Center was amazing, you know.
It was amazing.
My great uncle used to tell me these stories as well. My great uncle was a mathematician, interestingly, because Usbongile Mngoma, I don't know if you know, is a mathematician who's a musician.
Oh, I didn't know.
She teaches. She teaches using music. Teaches mathematics using music and whatever you. And my great uncle was T.W. Kambule.
Okay.
He has a building named after him at Wits, the mathematical statistical sciences.
Yes,
that was my great
light
uncle.
in complexion, right?
Yeah, he had vitiligo, but he said he was a white man. and what he used to tell me these stories about places like Funda Center and many others where the arts were seen as being the core of everything we do. Because you must remember that if you're a person who respects your culture and your heritage, another big thing in our manifesto is traditional leaders.
Yeah.
Bringing respect. It comes back to me now as I'm talking about this. Because at the core is of who we are is our culture and our heritage. So the day we have full respect and full pride in who we are, and the expression of which is given by our artists, by our creatives, is the day we're going to move to the next level as a people.
Sure, there's so much to talk about, and it's like we don't have enough time.
We can have round two.
I'd like for us to have a round
just
two.
tell us, we'll come and have round
There's
two.
so much to talk about. Jeez. And I know, Guti, we also skimmed through your career. There's so many things that you've done. But on this political one, there's so much to be done. You also I hear you talking about inclusivity.
Yes.
Also making the example about the Mendoza effect.
Yes.
But you also have got a big chunk of people right now who are complaining about our current president saying, "Oh, President Yabelung."
Yeah.
Are you for everybody? Where does UDM stand as far as abantu abamnyama are concerned?
Hey. So I don't want to comment on this President Yabelung. I want to leave it because I agree, President Yabelung. Tina, we want to be a party, everybody. But when you're a party for everybody, though, you cannot avoid the reality on the ground that abantu abamnyama are the ones who still suffer the most 30 years later.
Yeah.
You cannot avoid the reality that abantu abamnyama are the majority of this country. You cannot avoid the reality that the most unemployed people are black people. Right? The most entrepreneurial and most innovative by numbers are black people.
Yeah.
So you can't. I mean, you can't avoid the reality and the truth. It stares you in the face, right? So yes, you've got to be able to say. I think maybe I want to talk about the President Wabelung. You see, the problem with the current president is he believes that white is superior. It's a colonialist mindset. He truly, truly believes it. I mean, if you see how he behaves. I took him to Geneva. Me. Right? Worked with a team to get him to chair a committee, a global committee, to give him some vavavoom, to give him like a international platform at a time when Zuma was saying, he has no international profile. I don't know if you remember that time.
No, I don't.
So, when he tried to come in, there was a time when there was an allegation that he doesn't have an international profile. What does he know? Nobody knows him. So we wanted to give him a little bit of an injection. He went there, and when he got there, first of all, he refused to be briefed by me. Yeah, I briefed him for 10 minutes instead of an hour. He was falling asleep as I was briefing him. I don't know what was wrong with him, but he was disinterested. Then I said to him, President, if Maufika Lapa, at any time, you see me resisting when you want to go a particular direction, you must know that is because I know something you don't. Because this is my environment. Right? He went there. There was a Mlungu whispering in his ear. A Mlungu who does not like me. A Mlungu who's not a good Mlungu. Right? He listened to this Mlungu, not me. He never stopped the meeting. He messed up everything there. Right? Now, why am I raising this as an example? Because as long as we have a Eurocentric approach or as the priest in the church that I went to on Sunday kept on repeating, a global north approach, we're never going to come right. We need a global south approach. You know, we talk about south-south relationships, right? South-south cooperation. But we talk about it on the level of rhetoric, not on the level of pragmatism and implementation. We've got BRICS. We've got something called the South Center, which is chaired by Umbeki, who I think I still respect him, even though I'm conflicted at the moment, because he said so many things about how bad his comrades are in the ANC, and yet he's marching and saying things that are strange, right? So, but it still doesn't change the fact that he's done some good work, and he chairs an organization called the South Center that I don't think many people know about in Geneva. The South Center is made up of 54 organizations of the South. Powerful organization where we don't need the Western world. We don't need the North. We don't need to be, held by the short and Kellys every time we want to do something and threatened with AGOA, for example, by the US, so we can't speak. We must agree to be flooded with chicken that they would not eat at home, but they must come here, right? Now, all those things, Zobulungu, include multinationals, which is the problem you have in your Copyright Act as well. That's why you've got this fair use clause. Nonsensical and very mischievous fair use clause. I don't know what that is. I said to somebody, when I used to run the music industry, because I realized people don't understand music. People don't understand music. They don't. They think it falls from the sky somewhere. So everybody can do what they like with it. They don't recognize that when uhlelunga lalanga 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, walala, wavuka futhi ngo9 wa7, because awufakanga itie waye officeini. So maybe that's also why I'm not wearing a tie, right? They don't look at it that way. So I said to people, so if somebody says, we want to take your music for fair use, which is motivated by the multinationals. The FANG, the FANG, that's Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, right? They've been lobbying this President Yabelungu and their colleagues and whatever it is, right? Now, the problem with that is that you don't understand it until somebody says, if you had your husband there, and I said I want fair use, would you give me your husband?
Of course not.
Yeah. So if I took my car and I put my car there and I said, I want fair use, so I think I need to take your rim for fair use, would you do it?
Of course not.
You see, because it's tangible. You see? But when it's intangible, you think you can just say, no, I want fair use. Fair use of my work. I mean, it's your work. How can you have fair use of my work without me? Uvelu decide, no, you need that for something else today, so I'll take it, right? So all these things are steeped in Eurocentric behavior and Eurocentric intellectualism that assumes a seniority and a superiority of thought over others.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
How well do you think you're going to do in Gauteng?
Very well. So well that I don't think Banyaza is coming back. So you see the thing for me that I've realized with people. So we've got this very undecided voter.
Yeah.
11 million of them. Hopefully we've gone into that and we've taken away a lot. And out of that, there's also another 5-point-something million that are first-time voters.
Yeah. Young people
who don't owe nobody nothing. They feel good. Yazini, we're looking after ourselves now. Skathele labantu abadala, right? Those people are going to shock everybody. Because the days of only working with how many shirts you give and how many food parcels you give and how much you can threaten people about the grant, you'll still do it with that age group.
Older age group.
But not these.
And a lot of people are saying that group that you're talking about, the younger one, they're saying majority of them are going to vote for EFF. Do you agree? There's
a lot of them that say they're going to vote for EFF, but of course EFF, though, where they lost the plot is when they started talking about opening the borders.
Do you think that pisses off a lot of people?
I know so many who've come to tell me. In fact, I was told even by my nephew, he sat me down, Uncle, I know a lot of people who were saying they don't want to talk to nobody. It's EFF, it's done. Manje, but they're looking for homes. But EFF it argue. But you must open borders, but there are no borders in Europe. I mean, I've never heard such. I'm sorry, this is nonsense, quite frankly, because I mean, some of us have spent time there, right? So there is a lot of that, and I mean, the EFF stands for some good things.
Yeah.
You know, I think people tend to say the EFF is radical, but it stands for some good things. But the UDM is better.
I get you.
Yeah.
What makes the UDM better than the EFF?
What makes it better is the fact that we are consistent. There's consistency. You know, we don't flip-flop, Tina. We don't like today's Thanda law, Xasa's Thandi law, and whatever. And we've proved that when we talk anti-corruption, we fight, even when we had our few seats, we fought till we got the truth out, right? And you've got, you know, you also have a huge diversity in the UDM. I'm sure there is in other parties, I just don't know it. For example, I tell you about my colleagues, Utlochi, as an example, sits on boards. You know, she's got huge experience on boards, state-owned enterprise boards. But these are people that are not given, you know, prominence. They're not given exposure. Instead, they have attack, especially when you're a woman. You know, it becomes, you know, the more ngati utleva, the more uzocindezelo.
Yeah.
Right? We've got, as I've said, Unava here is an ex-banker. Will do things for you, anything to do with banking and finance, but also commodity trading. Astrid, that I mentioned, is the deputy president of a trade union. She's been in the public service for years, has amazing experience there. They are busy working with us and for us at the moment as we speak. So we have that experience, but I think also it is important to mention that we have people who've got a very good pedigree. You know, what people forget is that Uolomisa, if you remember, for our democracy, maybe you don't remember. I mustn't keep saying you remember things.
I probably do, I probably don't,
Okay.
depending.
But what happened, if you'll be aware, is that as we were crossing over to the new South Africa,
I was young.
you were young. I thought so. There was a period where the ANC needed to have Mkhonto weSizwe, the original Mkhonto weSizwe.
Yeah.
Training and being stationed. He declared Transkei a neutral zone and took a big risk against South Africa and placed MK and the ANC there. You know, that's how I think he got friendships with the Chris Hanis and what have you. And people don't know how close he was, for example, to Mandela. But unlike many people, he doesn't use Mandela's name to wash toilets, quite frankly, as I would put it, which is what these guys do these days. You know, when they talk nonsense to you, I mean, the State of the Nation address speech that was I think up an hour 35 minutes. He had Mandela at the beginning and Mandela at the bottom, at the end, and in between was a lot of rubbish and tinzwalo. I mean, it's like, you know, to justify the nonsense and what have you. So we as the UDM, just to reinforce and reiterate, we're alive to the fact that we really haven't been in Gauteng before. It's a new venture to come into Gauteng, for example, but we are making a big play for Gauteng, and we have every reason to believe we're going to get huge support in Gauteng. For me, my absolute objective, which I will deliver on, is to get my guys on the list in. Okay, my guys on the list are going in, right?
And how many votes? How many votes do you need for that?
Do you know that I don't know? I mean, I think I still have to calculate. I think those are my experts. They're going to have to help me.
We forgive you. You've just joined politics this year.
I don't know. I've tried to calculate because on the national level, you need about 50,000 votes per seat.
Yeah.
But in Gauteng, I don't think it's the same calculation. I think you might need about 30,000, 40,000 maybe per seat, but it's not quite the same level, right? Okay. But at national, we're getting nothing less than 20. I keep telling people.
I like that.
Nothing less than 20. Nothing less than 20. Okay? And I'm very open to the universe to be surprised and given 40 if we have to.
Will the UDM do better than the MK party?
That's a good question. Well, do better in quantity terms, right? Just for the vote. I don't know. The MK is making some serious trouble. Especially for the previously ANC people, right?
Yeah.
But I think for me, when we're looking at a coalition government that we're going to have, I'm not so bothered by as many parties doing well as we do well.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you focus too much on other parties, it might end up rattling you.
Yeah.
I'd rather focus on what the UDM is going to do.
And that's what I loved about this interview. Pretty
Yeah.
much almost the entire interview, you never spoke about any other
No.
party. And I
No,
like that.
until you pushed me
It's
there.
only me now who's
Yeah,
pushing
you're
you.
pushing me there, you know, because
I'd like to know.
Because
what you
me,
think, yeah.
I'm focusing on what the UDM does and what the UDM can do and what the UDM will do. Because for me, I'm alive to the fact that at national, it's going to be a potpourri of mix that is going to be amazing, right? And we've got to be ready for it and be open-minded about it and have a way of managing it so that it works to the best of our people, right? And in looking at it, why for me I'm looking at the most seats for us and saying minimum 20 is because when you look at our track record with the few seats that we've had, we've been able to demonstrate that numbers do not necessarily give you quality.
Yeah.
But we do know that the bigger the number, the more the multiplier with quality. Right?
I get you.
So you need to have a good mix of quantity and quality.
Yeah.
Right? What I have absolute confidence in is that we've got a lot of content, a lot of experience, a lot of people who've done this to guide us who are new, to mix and match. But I have been impressed when I go into some of the door-to-door situations we've had. For example, I went to Beltfontein in the Free State to help with campaigning there. I've never seen so many young people in the UDM. I must confess, I didn't know that. You okay? And I know my colleagues were also surprised by how many. We even when we went to the Manifesto launch, we were so shocked. There's so many young people in the UDM, right? And some of them not old enough to vote. So it's good for the future. So we've got the young ones that are going to vote, but we've got the young ones that are, are activists, and all in white shirts and what have you. So we're going to do well. We're going to do very well.
Mr. MTHUNZI, I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to meet you. I'm looking forward to our second round.
Thank you.
But all the best for the elections.
You call the second round and we'll be here.
I'll definitely organize it. And maybe lastly, let's campaign. Speak to your Gauteng people there as their incoming premier. What would you like to say to the Gautengers?
I'd like to say to the Gautengers, corruption destroys freedom. As long as corruption is not stamped out, as long as we don't focus on the real Batupili, not the Batupili that we haven't seen practiced, but only have it on rhetoric, as long as we have people who only think of lining their pockets, there's a problem. In the UDM, we're going to make sure that there's delivery by practitioners who are experienced, by competent people, but more importantly, we say, help us to make Gauteng respected again.
Ladies and gentlemen, UDM Premier Candidate Mr. MTHUNZI, from businessman to politician. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
so
guys
much.
on the next video. It's been great
Bonga
hanging out with you. You're an astute speaker. You're very eloquent, articulate. You speak well. And it's always nice to have a guest like that on a podcast because the audience are always willing to just hear somebody okhulumayo, man. Bafuna information, And that was beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Siyabonga nathi.
We'll see you guys on the next video. Siyabonga uNkulunkulu anibusise. I love you. Danko.